but also very expensive. And then he is a former professor at Eindhoven University of Technology and Vrije University Amsterdam. Well, if you know the book, if you learn about BPM, you will know that Hajo is also the co-authors of Fundamentals of Business Process Management book. The translation is outside if you need some more copies, okay? And then he's not only working in business process management, but also in process mining, robotic process automation, and you will be surprised to know that he used to be a consultant, right, in Deloitte. So it would be interesting to see why has been working in Deloitte and become a lecturer. I think that's something that I would like Hajo to share with you a little bit later, okay? And then this is something that we would like to aspire to, but probably not in this lifetime, right? So his age index is 80-something, and then with 30,000 citations, interestingly, his first most cited is the Fundamentals of BPM. So it's a book, but it's highly cited by researchers. And then he was I'm sorry, you can correct me. He's listed among the world's top 20% scientists by Stanford University. Competitive research funding, euro 2 million. Don't try to calculate that in rupiah, please. He supervised 100 plus master theses and numerous PhD researchers. And he's also the program chair for International Conference on Business Process Management and International Conference on Process Mining, and also KAIS, I think. True. And then this is very important for those of you PhD students, he is also the Vice Editor-in-Chief in Business and Information Systems Engineering or BISER. He is a co-author of the globally used textbook Fundamentals of BPM. So without further ado, I will let Hajo, this is the moment that we've been waiting for since 2020, to start his talk on process science. Hajo,
thank
you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Professor Mahendra, for inviting me to come over. It took some time, but believe me, I'm very happy to be here. Also, thank you for contributing, right, to some of these things. To also be one of the translators of the textbook, which I hope will contribute to also spreading the word about business process management in Indonesia. I'm very happy that I have an Indonesian translation. Maybe you know this, my mother was born in Indonesia, so for me it also has a special value that this book can be read in the language here. Oh, should I use that?
Yes.
All right.
But actually you still use mic maybe? Or
I should,
audio in here?
both.
Yeah,
both. No worries. I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Impressive list. Where do I find the time, you think, of doing anything else? But let me tell you a couple of things about this. So, for example, I did my PhD also in Eindhoven. In Eindhoven University, and maybe you know somebody who is even more famous and more citations and more of these things. It's Wil van der Aalst. Professor Wil van der Aalst is the founder of, for example, process mining, and he used to be my supervisor. And I'm still working with him. Very kind and very influential scholar. What else can I talk about? Yeah, this was one of my worst years, 2025, where I agreed to be the program chair for 2 conferences. Never do that in the same year, right? That's a very bad decision. Currently, I'm also working on a new version of the Fundamentals of Business Process Management, which means more translation work for you, Professor Manuel. Yeah, I'm sorry for that. So again, welcome. I know that some of you have traveled very far to come here, and I really appreciate that you took the effort to be here. Having said that, I will switch, I think, my presentation to my own screen, right? Yeah. Let's break it up. Right. So what I will talk about today is an introduction in a topic where some of you may already have heard a lot about, maybe studied already in this field. The talk is meant to give those who are perhaps new to the field or don't feel that they are so much into the topic yet, a bit of an overview. A bit of an overview in the sense that I will try to explain where the discipline comes from, what the main contributions are, in my opinion, on what has happened in the last maybe 30 years. Also some thoughts on the future, on maybe important directions for research, but again, it is highly subjective, it's highly personal. So maybe I'm be completely wrong. To be honest, at the time when Professor van der Aalst invented process mining, I said, oh, that's never going to work. So I was very wrong before, right? So I may be wrong again. And I'm also curious if you think about new themes or new topics. I would really like to hear this. Do I have a clicker also? No? No. Then I will use this. I will use this. So one of the things I wanted to clarify with my talk is processes, whether that is anything fuzzy, right? If people talk about processes, they may have a sort of an impression that that you can call anything a process, right? Maybe chemical processes, you have industrial processes. And since there are so many processes, it may not really be something very scientific. But I would disagree. I think that processes are not fuzzy and processes are everywhere, which explains that it is also important to understand, to analyze these processes, and where possible, also to improve these processes. So if you go away after this talk, I hope that at least I have managed that you will be able to tell others that process science and process management is not fuzzy. It is about very relevant, very concrete things, and more importantly, things which are all around us. And we all have a stake and an interest in understanding, but also improving processes. So I'm here in Indonesia, one of my favorite countries in the world, and I can see processes all around me, right? And we can go back in time and already see that people have been engaged in all kinds of processes long ago, right? So if you look at the panels on the Borobudur, you can see processions, you can see people preparing food, you can see ships, you can see all kinds of activity where people work together to establish certain goals. They carry out rituals, they go to the marketplace to sell, produce. So it is an activity that people have been engaged in for centuries. Of course, Indonesia is also very well known for many of its products. Also goes back to history. There are all kinds of traditions. So there is this, you can see here a picture of making batik, which is a tradition, but also, of course, is modernized and it's improved, and there are new designs all the time. So there is also an interest in understanding that process and improving that process. When I go through the streets of Surabaya and other cities, I can see all things which remind me of processes, right? If I see deliveries taking place, I start thinking, oh yeah, if there's food is going to be delivered, there must be a service to order that food. Somebody must be in charge of the technology to support making these orders, of the accounting part. Probably there's a lot of data that is collected about these delivery processes, which is analyzed to improve the process, to do the billing. So it's maybe a deformation, but whenever I see something which is happening anywhere, I start thinking about what is behind it. How is it organized? How will it be possible to perhaps understand, but also improve that process? There below, you see in Kalimantan how natural gas is being transported into ships that go to Korea and go into Japan. It is currently an activity that Indonesia is earning a lot of money from. It's attracting, I think, a lot of industrial attention. But of course, for Indonesia, it is also important to understand how these things work, to analyze data and optimize these processes. So with just looking around and maybe also reasoning back, but also looking at how things look currently, we already understand that so many things are happening around us which have a process component to it. And really all kinds of processes could be the focus of the things that I'm going to talk about in the next maybe 35, 40 minutes. I have here an overview. I didn't create it myself. It is a table that comes from a paper which is written by Jan van Brokke and others. Jan van Brokke, who was another enthusiastic visitor coming over to EasyCo. When was that? It was last year, right? Last year, yeah. I heard that he found it a fantastic visit also to come over, and his family also enjoyed it being here. And what he did together with a number of other authors, there's also Nick Berenti is also an author, I see that, is an overview of all kinds of different processes. Because maybe when you, just like me, have a background in process management, you think of processes mostly in the administrative area, right? Where maybe tax processes, bank processes. But what they have done is to give an overview of processes can take place and can be identified in all kinds of areas. So taking a look at the top, there are, of course, psychological processes, the way we organize our thoughts, the way perhaps we develop psychologically from a child to adulthood. Those are processes typically not studied by industrial engineers or information systems professionals or computer scientists, typically studied by psychologists or cognitive scientists or neuroscientists. But they are processes in the sense that there is a development, that there are different stages involved, and that there is complexity. There are processes on the social level, the way people, how they interact, how they form groups, how they form perhaps opinions, how they develop as a group and have influence. Processes, again, not studied by our communities, but processes nonetheless. There are environmental processes, and it is interesting to think about environmental processes, whether they are the same types of processes as we are interested in. Many environmental processes are not man-made. I would say the development, the geological development of the world is maybe something that we as a human don't play a big role in. On the other hand, when we look at the environmental changes, when we see, for example, climate change or disruptions in seasonal patterns, then there is, of course, there's also a role that people play there. And again, I think that it may be useful also to consider those kind of processes with the tools and the technologies that we have. But I will get back to that towards the end of my talk. An area, the political area, I've been starting with my PhD students also to look more into political processes. Because it is, in the Netherlands, we have all kinds of scandals, things that happen, money that is misspent. I know that Indonesia is managed much better than the Netherlands, I'm sure about it. But in the Netherlands, we very often have the question, how did it get so far, right? And then we have to reason back to all the steps that have been taken by politicians, by civil servants and other people involved, how these different steps have been taken, which decisions have been taken to understand the current situation in the outcomes. Again, I think that is an area where it is also could be important to take a process perspective. And then we have the stages where I think most of you are, hey, good morning, welcome, good that you're here. Just started, Hamza, just started. Take a seat, yes, please. So then the lower stages, those are the stages where I think most people who have been working on processes are most familiar with the process perspective. Those are the things that we as industrial engineers and computer scientists, we understand that there are processes on those levels which we can analyze, and this is the more common ground. But again, what I wanted to show you is that we can think of processes in a much broader sense than perhaps you are used to. So just a very, very short reflection on what processes then are, because I think one of the flaws that a scientist can make is to talk about things and not define them, right? It would be very German now to give you a very specific definition. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to give you an idea, right? The idea is that when we look at processes in an economic or organizational, you have a clicker for me? Yes. Ah, yeah. Shall I connect it? Oh, yeah, that's fine. So a big difference between the way we traditionally look at organizations, where we consider the functional groups and units. Processes are things that really flow between all these business units and departments, right? We are interested in how people cooperate, no matter where they are working in an organization, to get things done. So very often it is the product or the service that is eventually delivered that is very tangible. Shall I try it? Balloon?
Yeah, it worked.
Worked? Ah, through that. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. But the products are very tangible, but the processes are less tangible, and we are often trying to find out how these processes develop. This is the only thing that I will explain about what a process is. We're going to look a little bit more into detail what then, oops, wrong direction, what these work processes are. So if I had to explain in one sentence what a work process is, so I'm not talking about sociological, psychological processes, but a process that takes place in a business context or an organizational context, I would say work processes are organizational algorithms. Work processes are the ways how organizations make things. So if you can imagine a computer that perhaps produces a particular outcome or an analysis result, processes are the way how organizations carry out work to produce something. So that is also the relationship with our field, with other fields where they are very busy thinking of computational algorithms, the steps to take. We, as discipline, interested in processes, are creating the algorithms for organizations to do their work, right? So it's a very, I would say, very condensed view of looking at processes. Now, if you ask me, what is this discipline? Process management or process science, because I think that is a better term. Process science is the broader perspective on process management. Process management is perhaps more focused on organizations. Process science is the bigger field where we also look at all other kinds of processes. What are now the contributions of the process science field? I've tried to, on the basis of my experience, try to condense all the work that has happened perhaps in the last 30 years or something into a number of contributions. I think for everybody who is really starting in the process management field, it's nice to get a bit of an idea on this. For all the people who have more experience in this field and who already have worked in this area, I invite you to reflect on this, whether there are things that I have forgotten about, and perhaps that should be also in this list. But I will get back to these contributions during this talk. Let me give you now first a bit of a historical view on process management, then we get to the contributions, and then I will give you a sort of an outlook for what will happen in the future. Yeah? So we start with the past. My feeling is that the process management discipline has derived from other disciplines. So the process management field is maybe 30 years, 40 years old, but there are older disciplines that preceded the process management discipline that have contributed to thinking about processes, and what was also the development of the different tools in our field. So there's a management side to it, and there's a computer science to it. Let me start with the management side. So a very, oops, I'm now moving too far away, I think, from my computer. Yeah. So the management side, a very clear predecessor of process management is the work that happened around the start of the 20th century, and which was for a big part inspired by the thinking of Frederick Taylor, an industrial engineer. Frederick Taylor, an American, has become famous for his thinking of scientific management. Scientific management is the body of knowledge that try to look at work and identify all the different stages in a production process. So Taylor proposed that instead of workers trying to assemble a car from the start to the end, is that he would split that up in several steps, and each of these steps would be executed by specialists completely specializing in that step. If you have ever done an experiment where you have tried to compare working in the way that Taylor proposed, by highly specializing or trying to do all the different steps in a group, you will find out, and it's quite impressive, how much more efficient it is to specialize. So I've done experiments with my students where we try to make pizzas, right? We have a group of 5 students, each of the students trying to make a pizza from the start to the end, or splitting the work up between the 5. After some time, you will find out that splitting up the work between the students, so one student creating the base, the other students taking care of the sauce, the other of the toppings, the other operating the oven. If you start doing it in this way, instead of that you have 5 people working through the kitchen and doing all these steps at the same time, you will find out it's very easy to start working 2 times as fast. And if you specialize a little bit further and you get a little bit better, it's going to be 3 times as fast. Taylor found out that working in this way can speed up the work 10 times. And that is incredible. 10 times. I think that since this principle, we have never been able to find any technology, any concept that has contributed to making work more efficient than this principle, right? No technology, no other idea has contributed so much to our thinking of how we organize work. It's incredibly influential and very difficult to overstate. Now, that kind of, going to the wrong side, is an important element of the way we think of processes. But it's not the only element. In the 1990s, Tom Davenport, you can see his name there. He is a very famous scholar from the United States, who has become very famous for all his work about thinking about processes. He came up with a very influential view and a paper which is called The New Industrial Engineering, Information Technology and Business Process Redesign, where he said these processes are important, but we have something new. Well, it was new then in the 1990s. We have information technology, and information technology can help us to improve these processes even further. So Taylor thought about splitting up the work. Tom Davenport and many others thought about how information technology can be used to more easily transfer information between all these different steps to make the flow of work actually even more efficient and faster. So the addition of information technology in this field has been a very important element. It also explains why, even though computer scientists sometimes do not understand why we as process scientists use their tools, for us, technology is an incredibly important ingredient as well. Now let me move to the other side. So I talked about the management discipline. Now I talk about the computer science discipline and how they have contributed to the business process management field. You see there a picture of Skip Ellis, another American scientist. He sadly already passed away, but he worked at Xerox PARC. For those people who are here in the audience, I don't think there are many people who are older than I am, maybe not so many people of my generation. Anyway, they will remember Xerox PARC, which is was a hotbed of innovation in the United States. For example, they thought of many ideas that have been incorporated in the Apple computers in the early ages, but they did quite fascinating things. And Skip Ellis was one of the first scientists who developed IT systems. Here it's called Office Talk, which started to contribute to automating work in the office. So he started modeling office procedures and creating technologies to support these processes. Many others have worked on that field. This is a important paper by another group of authors who identified that software developers and software engineers started identifying the different steps in the software production process and started modeling how these processes evolved so that they could get better track on the software development process. And this also had benefits for software development. So you can see that in the computer science part, people started to become interested in automating, analyzing, and modeling the processes. And then these things started to come together. So there were industrial engineers thinking of processes, computer scientists interested in automating and modeling processes, and these fields starting to get together. And one of the, I would say, important points in time where you could see that this happened and that these people started meeting was the conference in Eindhoven in 2003. That was the first international conference on process management. You can see Skip Ellis there to the left. At the left bottom, there is a professor, famous professor from Germany, Professor Manfred Reijers. I had him yesterday on the phone. He didn't know that for me it was already 11:30 because he expected I was in the Netherlands. We had a business to talk about. He was very young there, but he's a pioneer in our field. You can also see here in this picture a very young Wil van der Aalst sitting there. This is Kees van Hey. Those were my supervisors in my PhD project. Here you can see Professor Rosenberg, who was a BatteryNet specialist, so a mathematician more or less. And all these people from different disciplines all found out that they were interested in processes. You can also see a very young version of myself here. I think my hair has improved over the years. I don't know why it had that haircut at that time, but it was fashionable, I think. And the gentleman who is sitting here, does anybody know who he is? Does anybody have a feeling? Who is it? You know it, Hamza? It's Petri. Yeah, it's Karel Adam Petri. Karel Petri. So the German professor who invented the notation of BatteryNets. He didn't call it BatteryNets. Later on, other people called it BatteryNets. He was there to give a talk. You also can see that he was wearing an award. So he got the highest scientific award in the Netherlands for his work. So this is one event where you could see that these things have come together and have become sort of a start of our discipline. So this tradition is going to continue because this conference is taking place in different areas. It is taking place today this year in Canada, but in 2028 we have Professor Mahendra. Is that news or is that? Can I disclose this?
It would be my honor if you can disclose it.
So in 2028 we will organize the International Conference on Business Process Management on Bali. So I think that is a fantastic development, and I'm incredibly grateful also for the team here, for Professor Mahendra and everybody who's involved in this, of bringing BPM to Indonesia. It's also, I think, showing how the discipline is growing, not only in numbers, but also in diversity, in incorporating perspectives from all across the world. And I'm very happy that this is going to happen. It's not the first time going to Asia. BPM was also organized in China, but I hope this will give also an enormous boost and inspiration for all of you to contribute and to come over and to meet with the others from the discipline. I already put it in my agenda, of course, I will certainly be there. All right, so when I reflect on that past, my conclusion is that processes have become a very central object of study for many of us. It has roots in the management of computer sciences. The development started maybe 100 years ago, and maybe even earlier. I mean, I have given earlier talks where you could see that one of my interests is ancient history of the Romans. I love everything which has to do with the Romans, and you can already find texts of 2,000 years ago of how, for example, Romans managed the estates and their production of agricultural production and how they organized that. That's already 2,000 years old, right? And perhaps we can go even further back, I don't know, to the Egyptians, how they managed their work. But let me say this development of process management started at least 100 years ago. It has become much more popular since the 1990s. So think of Tom Davenport, Michael Hammer, who were important scientists making the field more popular. And I would say that the last 30 years we can see a solid and growing discipline of process management, which I think is now at the stage that it becomes even broader. It becomes from process management, it becomes process science. Okay, now let's move on. We've seen the past, let's move into the present. This part of the presentation is there to give you a bit of an idea which I think are the major contributions of the field, because that is important. If I say that it's going to a maturing discipline, what have we established? And this is my summary, and probably there are all kinds of different perspectives possibly, but this is my summary. So I think that we managed in this discipline to come up with a number of important modeling approaches. So that's how we started, to look at how we can capture processes, how we can describe them. If you don't understand the process, you can hardly think about improving a process. So modeling approaches, how we automate processes. There are different approaches and development technologies to make processes run more efficiently because we can automate them in part or completely. There are patterns. Patterns is that's a bit of the fuzzy element, I would say, of the contribution, where we do not fully understand, we don't have a theory of how to do it, but we can at least see glimpses of things, of recurring things, patterns that are worth noting and perhaps make use of. And then finally, I would say we have a big collection of analysis techniques so that we can take a look at a process and we can do something interesting. We can compute something, we can determine a property, we can identify a weakness or something else, right? So these are, I would say, the four major contributions, and I will go into a little bit more detail now. So modeling approach is maybe the most obvious contribution, and for many years this was the focus of process management discipline. I would say it's not important anymore, but I think we have moved beyond just modeling processes. But we started as a discipline with an interest in developing techniques for really capturing processes. So many of you will know the technique of BPMN, but for many years people have also invested time in developing other formalisms, EPCs and workflow nets. And it's not just only the modeling, but also the inclusion of many interesting properties. Let me give you an idea of the kind of things. I think it's very cool what has been done. Let me give you an idea of that this is more than just thinking of boxes and arrows. What you see here, this is a Petri net. And there's no talk that I can give without including a Petri net, right? That is sort of my how I was brought up as an academic. So you see a Petri net. It's not so important to understand the whole process. What is important is to understand that there's a sort of a start, there was a complex part, and there's also an end to that process. Okay. There are academics who have thought about this modeling technique, and one of the, I think, great examples of what you can do is when you model a process in this way, which means as a Petri net, with a start place, with an end place, which is properly formed and connected. One of the things that you can do is when you model a process like this, is that you can compute and prove that this process is sound. What does that mean, soundness? Soundness means that if you start this process at some point, that eventually, the process will end with a token, this black dot in the end place, which means it is completed, and that the rest of the net is completely empty. So there's no work that is dangling somewhere. More important than that, when it is sound, it also means that the process will never get stuck anywhere. So that at some point, for example, two parties are waiting for each other. One is waiting for the other to respond, the other is waiting for a reaction from the other, so the process cannot proceed. It's a live lock or a deadlock. You can prove mathematically that if the process has certain properties, in fact, if it is live and it is bounded, those are very precise mathematical properties. If it is live and bounded and it is modeled as a workflow net in this way, then the process is sound. Why do I think that is so impressive? I think that is impressive because it doesn't matter what the process is about, whether it is about invoices, whether it is about tax declarations, whether it is about customer complaints, creating a healthcare plan for anybody else. It doesn't matter. We can compute soundness for these kind of processes, and we can do it very quickly. Now, maybe for a process here, maybe you are so good at reading battery nets, better than I am, that you could immediately see that this is true, that the process will never get stuck at any point. But even if you're very good, an industrial process may contain 200 or 300 or 500 steps, right, of these boxes with all kinds of arrows. Then for humans, it becomes incredibly difficult to determine this property. And we can do this automatically. And I think that is a very cool thing that we have come up with these kind of contributions. And it also hopefully gives you a bit of an idea that modeling goes a little bit farther than just understanding of drawing, right? We can compute things on the basis of a formal model. And we can do other things. We can simulate the process and we can do all kinds of analyses. But this gives you a bit of an idea, I would say, of the sophistication of things that we developed over the past years. We've also done other things. Just one more example. This is a declarative model. Is anybody of you familiar with declarative process modeling? It's an entirely different approach. It's very interesting. If you ever have the chance and you are interested in process modeling, then take a look at declarative modeling. What does declarative modeling do? It looks the same, right? You cannot see any difference. So don't focus on the visual part. But the declarative process is, instead of saying, first you should do this, then you should this, and then you should do that, which is the normal way of process modeling. That's imperative, because you say, do this, do that, do that. Declarative modeling says, you can do anything, except you have to take some kind of restrictions into account. So in this case, this is a process model where this says you can always receive bug reports at any point. There's no order in it, right? The only thing is that needs to happen in the process that once you receive a bug report, you must at some stage also search for that bug, right? That is the only restriction. But you can also start for a bug in an archive without having immediately a prior bug report. You can, let me see, you can commit changes. You can also insert a bug report into the archive, but you cannot do both of them. That is forbidden. So it excludes that these two things happen. It's a different way of modeling. And especially when you have a process where you have a lot of flexibility, maybe it's more efficient to say what you cannot do than to write down everything that you must do. It's a different way of thinking about it, and it's also, I would say, a very important direction in the process modeling research field, and it still has many follow-ups, and I just give it as another example. Maybe to cite my good friend Jan Mentling, who is also co-author of the process management textbook, and very well known by some people here in the room. Isn't that true, Hamza? This is work from the PhD thesis of Jan Mentling. I think it's a fascinating story, so I'm telling you this. He developed analysis tools to find out errors in process models. And SAP, one of the biggest IT companies in the world, are very famous for their very expensive but also very clumsy ERP software, which is used by many organizations, including my own university. When you buy it, you get a collection of, you received previously a collection of 600 process models, more or less explaining to you how to do anything in your company. So Jan Mentling ran them through his analysis tools and found out that 5% of these, or 5.6% of all these models contains errors. Yeah, situations like deadlocks, or for example, in this situation, it turns out that if you look at the start of the process, it means that you can initiate the same process multiple times, which becomes very difficult to manage. He counted that as a mistake. So he published his results in a paper in Data and Knowledge Engineering. And I can tell you that his relationship with SAP deteriorated after that. They don't see him as a friend anymore. But it is cool that with the kind of tools that we developed in our discipline, we can tell industrial vendors, right? We can tell them about the mistakes and the errors they put in their own models. And I think that also shows what the role is of us as academics, right? We cannot completely rely on big tech and all these companies to create quality things. It's our duty also to test this and to see if we can do better and if we can also protect companies and organizations from the commercial tools of big tech. So applause for Jan. Well, no, don't do that. He's not here anyway. So, but that is, I would say, that is the kind of things we can do with process models. Now let's move to the second contribution: automation platforms. For a long time, our discipline has looked at tools to automate processes. When I was a consultant, Professor Mahendra already mentioned that my job was to go to companies and to model their processes and automate these processes with workflow management technology. And now in every modern ERP system, there are process engines and there's process automation. We now also work on, of course, on all kinds of software agents that carry out work. That all goes back to thinking in the early 90s and 2000s on process management. And in the research community, there's a wide variety of automation platforms that have been developed, which are very interesting. Sometimes these platforms have been used to show the feasibility of underlying research ideas. So the automation platform wasn't meant to start automating processes in a very intensive way, but it was more to show that certain things are possible for scientists. And there are two examples of highly sophisticated platforms that have been developed in our community: YAWL, which at some point stood for yet another workflow language, and ADAPT. I don't know what it stands for, ADAPT. But ADAPT is connected to Manfred Reijers, the professor that I showed you earlier. YAWL is for a big part the brainchild of Arthur ter Hofstede from QUT, right? Famous university where some of us are involved in. And, oops, going to the wrong side, I'm sorry. This is so at the top you will see a process model that is modeled in the YAWL notation. And I'm now citing a paper which was published in 2020, which gives an overview of how the YAWL system has been used by other scientific disciplines. So how it has been used by pharmacists, chemists, biomedical engineers to find out things about their own processes. So this is the technological setup, but interestingly, this whole system has been used for example, that is I think a biological process where data clusters are created, there are sequence data are generated, and then the map genome, I have no idea what it means really, but the genomes are being matched. So other disciplines are using our technology to carry out and analyze their own processes. And why do they not use commercial tools? Well, obviously because this is cheaper, but also because they sometimes have very sophisticated demands on how their processes should develop. And this is an example of a paper which shows that there are 6,000 academic papers using YAWL to carry out all kinds of process analysis, right? So it gives a bit of an idea of the impact that this technology can have. This is an example of the ADAPT platform. Maybe it looks a bit cryptic to you what you can see here, but what's actually happening is that it shows that if you have an existing process which consists of a number of steps, and all of a sudden there's a new step, step X, that needs to be inserted there, then you run into all kinds of problems if the process is already running. If you are already carrying out that process and somebody says, "Oh, we forgot a step, step X." Well, it's not a problem if step X still needs to happen in the future, right? But what do you do with all the instances, all the cases of the process where X should have happened or may have happened, right? What do you do? How are you going to update the process? Are you going to roll it back and then carry out X? Or are you going to do something to compensate for step X? Are you going to carry out X, but could that violate something that you have done in the past? These are very difficult questions. And especially, again, if there's a big volume, if you have hundreds of cases or thousands of cases running all at different stages of the process, and you have to insert this step that you've forgotten for all these thousands steps, and you have to manage how all these process instances need to be updated, that's an incredibly difficult thing. You cannot do it by hand. You need technology to manage these kind of updates. And that is the kind of thing that this platform can do. It can help you to change running instances to update the process to a new specification. So for example, if you take a tax process, like in the Netherlands where we have to, in Indonesia it's the same, where you have to declare your taxes at some point and the law changes, right? So what do? There are all these instances. Are you going to carry out all these instances and then implement the law? But maybe the law has to be, retrospectively implemented. Then you have to update these changes. This is the kind of technology that is now working. And in my opinion, the technologies that have been developed in our field are better than anything that has been developed by industry. Because they're so powerful, and yet they have not been incorporated in the kind of technologies that many organizations nowadays use, which I find mind-boggling, right? We know how to do it, but we failed at some point still to make that impact. Manfred Reijers can tell you more about it. Maybe he's also a nice guest to invite. I'm sure he will be glad to come over too. So that is the second contribution. So there are two more left. And I'm only giving examples because there's many more to say. Patterns. So maybe my favorite category. Many of the contributions from the BPM field, they take on the form of patterns, guidelines, and practices. They lack a strong, I made a spelling mistake, they lack a strong formal justification or basis, but they are often rooted in empirical data. So what I mean is, we looked at the world, we saw something interesting, we picked it up, and apparently it's useful to apply in other circumstances. There are three examples: workflow patterns, modeling guidelines, and redesign heuristics. And here I'm going to shamelessly show you work that I worked on myself, right? So a little bit of self-promotion just to give you a bit of an idea on why I'm here and not Manfred Reijers or Wil van der Aalst. So one of the list of patterns, which I think is very well known and also a bit surprising for us because it has become so popular, there's a short list of 7 guidelines of how to model processes. We call it the G7. We didn't have so much fantasy at that time. I worked together with Jan Mentling and Wil van der Aalst. For example, if you model a process, to use as few elements in the model process as possible. But also minimize the routing paths per element. So if you have a sort of a network node and you have 3 incoming arrows and you have 4 outcome arrows, that is very difficult for people to process, then you can better split that up in first network nodes with 3 incoming, then have a next node with 4 outcoming. So I'm now immediately violating the first guideline. You see that? Yeah. So these guidelines, they are interesting, but are they internally consistent? It's a bit of a balance that you have to find between these things. It shows it's not a formal theory. It gives you a couple of ideas, but they are not just falling from heaven. Behind all these guidelines is very thorough research what the impact is of applying these guidelines, and we collected them together. So there are many experiments on how people look at process models. When you use, for example, use one start and one end event, it turns out to be that this is so much more easy for people when they have to read a process model, that they understand that if there are multiple end events, it is incredibly difficult for them to get a bit of an idea of how the process can unfold. If it all comes together at a certain point, apparently it's easier to make sense of them, but there's sound empirical work behind it. So this is a list. I think that you can make much stronger guidelines on basis of your personal experience than what I've mentioned here. For example, decompose a model with more than 50 elements. I already started finding it difficult to read a process which has 20 elements, right? But you can see statistically that it really starts to go down the drain after 50 model elements. So it's an example of a set of guidelines. Are they complete? Are they the best ones? Are they sharp enough? We don't know. This is not the end, I would say. We can come up with probably better guidelines, more elaborate, more specific. It's not a theory yet, but we perhaps seeing a sort of the glimpses of what you can do. This is another example. This is an example of work that I've been doing when I was a PhD student myself. So I did projects as a consultant previously. I read all kinds of cases on how people improve processes. So how they've written it down, how they have done it in certain situations. And I started analyzing that, and I saw that there were patterns that consultants and process engineers starting doing similar things for different organizations. So they, for example, they started looking at type of work that is superfluous, that they could take away from the work. So eliminating work. Apparently that's a pattern that can work. There are other patterns, for example, to try, if it is possible, if you want to speed up the work, to do things in parallel. I've read many cases, and I've also seen it applied, that people try to do this again and again if speed is important. So this list of 29 redesign heuristics has become quite impactful. I don't think this is the final list. I think there may be more important ideas, more powerful ideas. This is just a list that I compiled. When I talked with my supervisors, I said, this is actually not such a strong part of my thesis. I'm not sure if I should include it. Bill said, why not? Why not write it down, write a chapter? Who knows what will happen? I think it's one of my most cited papers. And I had never expected that. But I'm showing it here to you to show you that there are some things which are simply useful, but we do not know whether it is the final part or whether it should be extended. In fact, it should be extended. I have had a previous PhD student who created a new list specifically for hospitals. Because in hospitals, for example, the physical layout of the department is very important to see how the operating room, how it connects to the wards, for example. So the physical layout in organizing medical processes in hospitals is very important. I never talked about that, right? So probably we have an idea of how some things work, which can still be improved. That is my main point. I think you get my main point by now. So last one. Last contribution, and then I'm going to go to the end of my talk. Analysis techniques. There are many analysis techniques that have been developed in our area. Many of them are connected to things that I already mentioned, that are connected to modeling platforms or process modeling approaches. So analysis, I treated it a little bit already. They are an important contribution in their own right. And there's one area that puts all the other contribution at the moment in the shadow, and that's process mining, right? Process mining has now become a field in its own right. What is process mining? Well, many of you have heard of process mining, are applying process mining. So this is the classic picture that Wil van der Aalst often used. If we want to understand the world and processes in it, we may want to look directly at the processes. But what we can also do is that we look at the records that these systems leave, the traces of carrying out processes. Because if we identify the patterns in these logs, we can discover processes which describe the real world. So it's a bit of an indirect way of thinking and looking at processes, and it has advantages over traditional approaches where we would try to interview people, for example. Well, that is a field in itself. I will not say too much about it, but in principle, one of the biggest contributions in our field is that if you tell us how a process unfolded for cases, so for case 1, we have done A, B, D, E, and H, and for 2, we did A, D, C, E, G, we can automatically recreate this process model here at the bottom, which describes the logic that is behind the execution of all these traces. And we can do much more advanced things. You can also give us a process model and give us an event log, and then we can say whether these two things match, for example. That is conformance checking, and there are many other things. But you get the idea, I hope. So let me now then, oops, I'm too far. Let me then reflect on the present and finish this part of the talk. So I think that the study of work processes has become a very vibrant and strong research discipline. We have formal, technological, and empirical contributions, and I give you examples: modeling approaches, automation platforms, lists of patterns, and analysis techniques. So what is the future going to be about? The future is more difficult to describe, so I'm just giving you my ideas of directions. So I think that it's very important for our field, if we are to become more mature, and if we want to make more impact on the real world, that we also start moving from these lists of patterns and lists of individual things to maybe core concerns. If I describe you, I give you a list of 7 things on how to model processes, they may be useful, but they don't really explain to you how to model a process. It doesn't explain to you how to start, which information to collect, what to focus on when you model process. We are in fact only describing some things that you have to take into account, some concerns, but it's not I would say, the core concern is how we create good process models, but we don't have a very, I would say, substantiated theory on how to best describe models. The same with my redesign patterns. Although I'm very proud of the redesign patterns and how often they are used, it's much better if we start evolving into theories on how to really improve processes, instead of having just a couple of ideas that we can sometimes apply, sometimes not apply, sometimes they are effective, sometimes they are not. We have to move on from these lists of fragmented understanding of modeling, automating, and improving processes to more integrated, complete theories, right? And that's a big challenge. That's a big challenge for our field, I would say. A second one is that we have to start moving from understanding the flow of processes, so that there are certain steps being carried out in the process, to understanding why, what the relation is between all these different steps. If we see in a process that first A happens and then B happens, it is interesting, it is nice, we can already do a couple of things, but how does B relate to A, right? What are the causal relations between these two? Is it because there's an information flow between them? Is that why we do B after A? Is B only necessary if something goes wrong when we are completing A? So we have to move beyond just modeling the order and understanding the order of things, but also the reason for why these things happen one after another. Do you remember I gave you the example of a political process, right? Maybe we have to understand why a politician in the past made a decision and then somebody else followed up on this and another politician changed it, etc. It's not enough to understand that all these things happened. We also have to understand the motivations of all these different steps if we want to improve this in the future, right? Ooh, I get emotional. Yeah. So from flow to causality. A third is that our field has mostly been looking at work processes in an organizational setting, in maybe governmental organizations, in corporations, in IT companies. I think there is an incredible value in moving our perspective, not just from work processes, but processes in general. Political processes, geological processes, environmental processes, maybe processes, societal processes. And it feels like a big step, right? Always our focus has been on these corporate settings. But I think we have a lot to offer. I think if I think back on about the pandemic, the corona pandemic, I think it is a missed opportunity, was a missed opportunity for the process management discipline, in the sense that we have very good ideas onto how to organize different types of processes. For example, vaccination programs, or the distribution of information on how the virus spread. And I think we have been looking at medical specialists, we have been looking at politicians, we have been looking at all kinds of specialists, but not process scientists that could have contributed to better dealing with this pandemic. I think next time, I don't hope there will be next time, but probably there will be a next time, I think process scientists should also step forward and say, hey, we know how to organize things. We know how to automate these kind of processes. We know how to invent new processes that nobody ever thought of because we have theories and we have ideas on how to do that properly, right? And that gives us a bit of an idea of the impact we can make as a discipline. And then finally, and this is, I think, a very important development in our field, it's of course the advent of AI. So how it will affect our discipline is that we have started thinking, but have to develop our thinking on how agents, autonomous, semi-autonomous agents powered by AI, how they fulfill a role and how we can integrate them into the specification and the execution of processes. And probably what the process management discipline can do and can contribute to the world is that maybe we are not the scientists who will develop the AI technology that powers the agents, but we will be the discipline that develops the guardrails within which the agents will need to work. We develop the processes, we are interested in the processes from start to end, and the objectives of these processes, also the constraints of the process within which the agents have to work. I think what will happen with AI technology is that companies are going to automate all kinds of different tasks, and they will not understand what the impact will be on all the other things that will happen in the organization. People are using generative AI to automatically generate all kinds of letters that they're going to send around. How are the other employees going to process that? Are they also going to use AI to analyze those same processes then? But is it the same letters? But why are we then inflating it first and then condensing it again? What is the value of this? Only a process perspective can help us to determine what the, I would say, rationality is of starting and automating all these individual steps, because it gives you a bit of a holistic perspective, right? Another thing is that we, for example, we now see all around us that structured information, like the things that we can put in databases, are now inserted in generative AI, and they create a textual story about how to interpret, and the textual story is we're going to store it. But we cannot do any computation anymore with all that text, right? So the transformation of structured to unstructured data that is now happening because of the use of generative AI is eventually going to hurt many organizations, because they cannot do anything with that textual information other than creating more textual information, right? So again, that is something that I think we as a process discipline can think about and can contribute to. Okay, so I spent a little bit more time on giving you these contributions, but this is the point that I come to an end, and I want to thank you for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Professor Reijers. And with that, now I open for questions.
Sorry,
Yes.
I was just too early. Yeah.
Okay, one from Pak Dito, and then another, maybe. Okay, Pak Hanu, and then Radit. Okay, I will hand over to Pak Dito.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I don't know how to say, but Netherlands, I think, is in danger now, because right now is extra time.
It's extra time?
Yeah.
Yes, extra time, one.
The score is 1 for Netherlands.
1-1, and you didn't say anything during the talk. Oh, thank you.
Okay. And now for the question.
Yeah.
Basically, in Indonesia, we have some BPJS Kesehatan. Basically, it's a government health insurance program that provides some affordable or free healthcare to a lot of people, so millions of people in Indonesia. However, we find some problems in the BPJS itself, because the long waiting times are one of the most common complaints. Because as I mentioned before, my wife is working on the hospital, and from her experience, treating the BPJS patients often involve some additional administrative and also regulatory procedures. If process science can help us discover the actual process and can explain why these delays are occurred. I just read your article about the process science here. We have some discover, explain, and also intervention. We know the problems and also we know the delays that occur, but how do we handle the intervention phase when we may have some problems, we know the root causes are driven by the government regulation, but it out of scope because the regulation itself is beyond the hospital. We cannot manage to do the regulation. So my question is, how do we handle the intervention phase? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think what you mentioned is that even though you understand what the causes are in a process that doesn't run efficiently, that creates waiting times in this medical process, that the actual root cause of those problems are in the regulations themselves, right? And how to make an impact on that area. So it connects to something which I only recently also started looking into myself, is that as a process community, that we maybe should also step outside of the focus of improving the process, also on informing people and institutes who make rules, what the impact is of their rules on the process. I think there is, for many policymakers, and whether they are national policymakers or maybe institutional policymakers, they fail to have any insight into what their rules generate with respect to administrative burden, inefficiencies of things, that waiting times in people. Many policymakers have no idea on what a simple rule can, what kind of problems it can cause operationally. Maybe it's also a bit of our fault that we have been trying to improve processes without making this connection very clear. So one thing I'm trying now in the Netherlands is to create a new program to fight bureaucracy. In the Netherlands, bureaucracy is one of our big issues, that there are so many rules, and in EU, the European Union in general, there are so many rules that it's very hard for many organizations to be competitive, to be efficient, also in healthcare. So one thing I'm trying to do is to expand our scope to rules, how rules have an impact on processes, so that you can show a policymaker, hey, if you would improve or change this rule, the impact is on this process that it will run faster, that we will have more patients that we can deal with. But it creates a mentality change of us, that we have to step outside of our process scope into the interaction between rules and processes. And I think that is something that we need to do to make a bigger impact, so that we can have a meaningful conversation with the people making these rules. Very often there's no incentive for people and no understanding of policymakers to change their rules, because they don't understand this impact, and then we cannot move forward. It's going to be super difficult to start this conversation, but I'm a bit optimistic, at least in the Netherlands, where we now also see that our tax office is really running into such huge problems that they cannot deal with all the tax declarations in time anymore. That used to be running fine, but the rules have become so complicated. The technologies are so outdated, so that now we, as a process community, have also start talking about rules. So I see that as a development. It doesn't solve this problem immediately, but my answer would be, we need to have a conversation with the people creating these rules to see to show the impact on the processes, to convince them that the rules need analysis and optimization too.
But is there any framework that can be shown to the regulator, provide the output of each phase? Just like discover, we have some output, and also intervention, we have some output that can be informed to the regulator.
I think what we can do, of course, is to show at least we can show the effect, we can show the performance of the processes, right? And we can then also explain why delays and waiting times, to which kind of rules they are connected. That's what we can show. but maybe that's not the kind of framework that you mean. So I cannot give you a more concrete suggestion than at least showing process performance and the causes related to the rules that generate these things. Yeah.
Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. In Indonesia, we have answer to all of that. That is a dashboard. I think everybody loves dashboard in Indonesia. Okay, so I will hand over now to Pak Hajo.
Thank you very much for your presentation today. I have finished my thesis in doctoral program in FS with my supervisor from Hajo, and but my thesis I always face condition about data set in process mining. In my I get data set from for my thesis 6 months, and my problem is the corporate in Indonesia. Always I face condition, maybe almost corporate in Indonesia, like no trust with us scientists. So even though in the name of vision, so I don't know. This is I think this is the important issue in Indonesia because about data set for process mining. I want to know about your opinion or your vision about this in maybe in Netherlands or maybe in Germany or maybe in Europe.
Can you for me clarify the type of problem you have? So is it the conversation with corporate about process mining results?
About the data set.
The data centers.
Yeah, the data set.
So you need to get now I get it. Yeah,
the corporation database.
I get it. The data sets. So I wish I could give you sort of a recipe on how to get your hands on these data sets, because the situation in the Netherlands and the EU is very similar, that corporations are incredibly shy to share data with scientists. I have the feeling, let me talk about the Dutch situation. In the Dutch situations, in many organizations, you have a privacy officer or a data governance officer, and I think his or her job is all day to say no. Anything you ask, no. Because why? That is very safe, right? It's very safe for organizations to say, no, you cannot use it, because then there is no privacy leak, there's no danger involved, right? But there's also no innovation. There's also no new things that you can try to do. So I try to tell organizations about the risks that they look at data only from a sort of a security or privacy or governance perspective to protect their data. If that is their only interest, right, then they miss out on a couple of things. They miss out that you can work with scientists to also try to learn and innovate new things. So one thing I try to tell them is, don't just include somebody from your governance structure, but also include somebody from your innovation or your R&D field. Let them together look at the usefulness of sharing this data with a scientific partner, because there is always risk involved for any company of sharing data, right? But there's also opportunity involved. And the big risk is that if we only look at it from one angle, we won't get forward. This is sometimes for many, or sometimes for some organizations, this is already a sort of a new perspective, that this is a balance between these things. So I try to incorporate more people when I start talking with organizations on how to use data. That's one thing. Yeah, that's at least one thing to think of. The other thing is that I noticed that it is more useful to, when you have a collaboration with one organization, to deepen this relationship than to try to develop new relationships with other organizations. Because it involves, and Michael Roseman would agree, it involves trust. At some point, the organizations need to trust you as a scientific partner that you will use that data in a responsible way. And once you have worked with them, they are usually more comfortable with continuing to work with you. So the investment to start with a new partner and to convince all these people of, incorporating it is much bigger than expanding a collaboration with one partner. So in my own case, I work with the academic hospital of our university. So one of my PhD students, am I recorded? I'm recorded. I cannot say that. Everything has a lot access to a lot of data in that hospital, right? But that has gradually grown because they've seen that the kind of work we have done, we have kind of analysis for them that they really benefit from. And then they start sharing a little bit more next time of another department. So it's also about building up a sort of a relationship with companies over time, and it is sometimes very painful. I have the same problem. I don't think in the Netherlands anything is better in that respect than in Indonesia, perhaps. So I struggle with this, and my main message is try to convince organizations not only of the danger but also of the opportunity, and acknowledge that there is a balance between these two. Yeah, I hope that helps a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Hajo. I want to ask, my name is Nabil. I want to ask about the role of AI in advancing process management. I read your paper about the robotic process automation.
Yes.
And I want to know if you have done more research about that using AI, because I want to know what more AI can do to improve process management, and the research here can collaborate for that area, because I want to focus my research on AI for my doctoral program.
Yes.
So I want to ask, what did you find that you can that can help process management using AI?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that the question. So I will repeat the question. So how can it perhaps contribute more things to automating processes, improving processes than what current software robots already can do? So I think when you look at the software robots or RPA robots that I studied in the past years, they are very focused on, I would say, rather structured, repetitive, and simple activities that we can automate. And the reason for that focus is that those kind of things are more easily to explain to in rules to a software agent or to model. So in a sense, it's the most straightforward way to automate processes or tasks in the process. So what I think that the AI will make possible that we cannot do with these software agents, that it becomes more feasible to automate parts, or at least support tasks which are more fuzzy, where there are less strict rules about how a particular task has to be executed, where we see much more variation in how a task is going to be automated at different parts. Why? Because we are now, the AI technology is become better at much better, of course, at understanding descriptions in natural language, in understanding speech, where people explain how they do certain things. It's much better at making sort of probabilistic analyses, that in some cases you do this, in some cases you would do that, and this is more or less the distribution. So I think what the future is for task automation is that we move from these simplistic rule-based and repetitive activities to much more sophisticated tasks, which are less repetitive, which are more complex, and which are perhaps more exceptional, which have to be carried out only in certain cases, because we can understand those processes using AI much better. So I think there is the opportunity from moving away from this small group of tasks to other types of tasks. And probably what is going to be interesting for new research is to also develop that. It's always about trade-offs, right? It's always about trade-offs. If we're going to use AI to understand certain tasks better, it will make mistakes. It will make mistakes, and we will also forget, it will be incomplete. So how do we balance again? So my talks are often about balance. How do we balance again the benefits that we can automatically analyze the behavior of the task, that we can make a step to the automation, but what will be the balance with the mistakes it makes, with the kind of cases it skips, the kind of things it misunderstands? Because in the end, it will then be a balance of we will probably not in highly critical processes where, for example, lives of patients are at stake, we will not automatically say, okay, this is going to be automated by this agent, right? But in many other cases where we can maybe run a risk because we can more efficiently process a huge number of cases, we will accept the risk that we will do a couple of cases, we will do that wrong, we will forget something. So probably then we need a sort of a feedback loop to find out to improve the process. So I would say that is where the challenge is and where the opportunities are. Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, now for next question. Are there, yes, Pak Dimas, Pak Yudi, and Eva, who are the as well.
Very good. Yeah, who starts?
Okay, I should say Pak Dimas.
Thank you for the opportunity, sir. My name is Dimas. So I have a little experience of using this field to manage some of these processes in authentication in Indonesia.
Yeah.
So for my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, process modeling is to modeling or picture or processes from the real world to the process modeling, right? So my question is, if we already have tools like Snapfield and all the business processes model are already in there, can we extract information like how many man-driven power we need in our organization to do that process business? That's my question.
Can you say it again? If we already have the business process models in the system, then what's your question?
Can we extract information to know or to calculate man-driven power? To execute the business process or time completion to complete the process.
So we have. I'm sorry if I misunderstand. So if we have all the processes, and whether we can complete it with more information to understand this process completely.
What information can you extract from the process?
What you can. Okay. What kind of information you can extract? So you have them. Well. Yeah. What kind of information can you extract from the process when you have them in an automation platform like this?
Can we calculate the manpower we need?
I see. Now I see the workflow, the capacity planning, the operation planning. Yeah. So for me, that question goes back to creating good simulation models. If you want to create a good simulation model, you need, of course, to understand the logic of the process. But if you want to create a simulation model that eventually also is very accurate in predicting the completion times of cases, the throughput time, cycle time, and wait time, we also need to have a very good understanding of the relation between the demand of the process in terms of cases that arrive at the process, the time that individual tasks take, and the probabilities that how cases flow through a process on the one hand, that's the demand side. And then on the other side, we need the supply side. We need the supply side. We need to understand the resources that we have, their availability, also their capabilities of which kind of task we have. And these two things need to be in balance. So if you have performance, you have the demand, and you have the supply. If you understand these three things, they connect to each other. if you want to find out what one of these three is, you have to have a very good understanding of all the other things. For example, if you want to know how many resources you need to commit to a certain process, you need to understand the process at the first, but you also need to understand then the performance of that particular process. So if you know what you want the process to achieve, you understand the structure, then you can reason back, for example, using simulation on how much capacity you need for the individual tasks. So if you want to do this kind of task, if you already have process in automation platform and you want to know more about the required capacity, I advise you to take a look at process simulation to find out, because then you can also play with the number of the capacity in different roles, increasing a capacity to see the effect, what it has on your performance and whether that meets your performance objectives. So simulation, in my perspective, is the best technique to help you answer your questions in this area. And you already have the process models, right? So that gives you the structure. But then you need to understand better your desired performance and how individual capacity is related to carrying out these different tasks.
So I need to add more data to my process model.
You need to add more data. You need to. So if you take a look at creating simulation of process models, if you take a look at that literature, you will find out which kind of data you need to add. You need to find the probabilities of how cases route. You need to make a connection between the individual resources and the task. You need to find out the arrival pattern of cases, the complexity of the cases, so that you know how they will flow through the process. And if you all know all that, you can compute the performance of the process. Yeah?
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you, sir.
You're welcome.
Yes.
I invite Pak Dimas to join our course later.
That's why I mentioned.
Yeah. Pak Yudi?
Thank you for my input. Hello, bro.
Hello.
Yes, my name is Yudi, and my dissertation is about the process mining. But this process mining is like new one in the smart farming that use the IoT. That's the
Yeah.
slide. Yours is environmental perspective. Object-centric process mining is grew up enterprise information system, where activities are the record of transaction.
Mhm.
My dissertation is apply the cyber physical smart farming setting, where the mass of the process is executed automatically by IoT and shaped by human discretion and with the local environment context. My question is, in your view, what is the most important challenge or the key adaptation the paradigm still needs as we move object-centric process mining out of enterprise system and into IoT driven?
Yes, your question. So, if I may try to summarize your question, what is the biggest challenge in this IoT-driven, I would say, execution of processes and monitoring of processes? What is the biggest challenge if you also consider that the processes are actually viewed from a sort of an object-centric perspective, right? So you have an object-centric perspective where you take into account the relationships between many things that happen in a process, and that you have IoT that helps you to monitor and track what is actually happening, right? You're looking for research challenges there.
Yes.
All right. Let me think. One of the technical problems of using IoT is to how you to connect the observations or the data that you track with all the individual objects that play a role in the process. Very often the sensors are not aware of which particular object flows anywhere. It can identify something, but it still needs to connect to the different objects that you know from your enterprise perspective. I don't know if that is a challenge, but in many cases, this is already very challenging to find out what an observation, how it relates to an object. Let me give you an example. We can, colleagues from for myself in Belgium, they use IoT to track how nurses go through from one department to the other, from one office to the other. However, they do not know exactly what nurses are doing at different stages. Sometimes there was a patient in the room and they infer that the nurse is interacting with one patient. But if there are two patients, they do not know which patient of the two is really being helped or in which order. So one thing that is a challenge is, even though it seems that you're getting more information from the sensors, a big challenge is to make sense of what the sensors, what the data really means in terms of the object. And I would call that the matching of the observation and the specific object. Have you encountered this problem already, or is this something which is taken care of in your own setting?
The big problem is the IoT sensor is like the calibration.
They are?
Calibration, data calibration.
Calibratie.
Yes.
Okay. So you don't know exactly how well they work.
Yes, the money sensor is in Indonesia. It's mainly is buying from Shopee, not from the corporate IoT, the big.
Yeah.
Corporate is not there.
No. Yeah.
And maybe the big problem is the data sensor is calibration of data.
Yeah.
There is fluctuative result.
Yeah.
With the result.
Yeah. So then the issue is not only the mapping of the observation or the sensing with the individual objects, but it's also the accuracy of the sensor itself, right? Yeah. So I think what our community can do, I mean, we are not electrical engineers, we are not the ones working on optimizing the sensors, but we are at least a community where we can reason about stochastic observations. So the observations give us perhaps a sort of a distribution of activities over time, which we may find difficult to pinpoint exactly to individual instances, but then we can at least reason about what happens in the process on a more aggregate stochastic level. So we can see that there is certain cases where there's a lot of activities, where there's less activities, how that transfers over time. And then there will be mistakes, there will be inaccuracies, but we can at least reason about on the aggregate level of these observations. So that is, I think, one direction of going, accepting that there are inaccuracies, but then we have to look at a more abstract level on how the process proceeds. Let me think if there are other things that I could come up with. So another challenge is in any process that you observe, there are low-level events and there are high-level events. A low-level event is that you see an aspect of an object at a certain moment in time. A high-level event is, for example, that in a medical situation that a diagnosis is completed, right? But there's a big distinction between a micro-event that is observed and a high-level event that makes sense from a business perspective. What is very challenging but very important is that there is a translation of how the individual events, let's assume that they are accurately captured, how they exactly connect to these high-level business events. And I think for anything that we want to do with IoT, we need to understand what the relationships are between these high-level and low-level events. Sometimes a low-level event may be connected to multiple important business-level events. Sometimes it's also the other way around, that if we need a high level, we want to understand the high-level business event, we need to understand at a low level many things that need to happen before we can say that something has happened. So to make the mapping between these different levels, low level and high level, is extremely important to make sense of our IoT data. So in any application, you need to come up with a sort of a map, connection between these different levels. And then, if things are inaccurate, you can at least start reasoning about, in general, which kind of things are happening within the organization. But the mapping needs to be developed and also needs to be validated by business experts.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
You're welcome.
Can
Yeah.
talk more tomorrow, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, please go Artie first before FI. Closer.
I'm Arti. I want to ask two questions. First, I work with my colleagues regarding process mining benefit, and we interview 9 participants from Indonesia and Australia. The results show that in Indonesia, mostly the challenge of process mining adoption is lies in the quality of data. Though the data from information systems there, but it's not stored in process lens ready. I mean, there is no adequate timestamps represent activity. Do you have any suggestion regarding this? And the second one is the uptake of process mining, particularly in Indonesia, is lagging from AI advancements. When we try to introduce PM to the top management, most of them are more interested in AI.
Yeah.
So how do you see this issue? Are they mutually exclusive, or actually we can utilize both of them for the better process management? Thank you.
Thank you for your Thank you for your questions. Let me start with the first one. The first one is, if I understand it correctly, is the quality of the event log, of the event data, and you mentioned in specifically the lack of timestamps. Yeah. So it is a well-known problem. There are a couple of things that you may want to think about. I think you can do process mining in a meaningful way already if you know about the order in which things happen. So even if you don't have a timestamp, if you, for example, can infer in the order in which things are executed, that also means that is the order in which it really happened. You can already start thinking, and you can start analyzing at least from an order perspective how things are happening, and you can start reasoning also about perhaps how things can change. It works to some extent because very meaningful things that you want to know from a process mining analysis have to do with time. So one trick that I can maybe recommend is that even though you have lots of automatically generated data without data, is that you do an additional analysis where people carry out the same process that you are interested in, but then manually keep track of at least a couple of times that they execute the process. We have done that in the Netherlands in some instances where we have a lot of automatically collected data without timestamps, but some reports of people who kept track for their working day of a couple of times that they executed the process, maybe 5 or 10 times, so that we at least have an idea of the order, how big these activities are, when they typically start, so that you can use that as a sort of a basis for generating maybe artificial but realistic, not real, but realistic data for your actual log, so that you start bootstrapping it from real observations to generate estimations or maybe realistic additions to that data. Because you can never get it back, right? But to get some extra data of where people make manual registrations, that could help. It depends also on the analysis, right? Which kind of analysis you want to do, whether the presence of time is important or not. And maybe you can tell me a little bit later what kind of analysis you have in mind. Maybe I can give you more specific advice. So that's the first question. Your second question is how management in general seems to be much more interested in AI than in process management. I understand. I don't understand it. I know this. It is the same in the Netherlands. So do you remember that during my talk that I also indicated that the thing that we can help organizations with is to get of a sort of a broader understanding of the impact of AI. I think that we as a community we are not the ones who are best equipped to say how AI will help to improve the execution of particular tasks within an organization. But what we can do is that we provide a much better understanding of how the overall impact will be on the entire process, that people start automating parts of with AI. I think that is a sort of an underestimated challenge for organizations, that if they start automating, so for example, in the Netherlands, in our Dutch railways, have invested in AI to predict which trains will break down and where there needs to be the trains need to be repaired or need to be proactively repaired. So they have created a very smart AI tool that generates thousands of recommendations per day of which things need to be repaired where. It is way too much for the servicemen to look at all these repair reports, so they ignore them because there's too much. They cannot spend their whole day going through thousands of reports. They really have to repair trains. So what they do is they completely ignore those reports and they continue working in the new way. I would say that we as a process community can much better understand how the automation of one part, the prediction part, has an effect on all the other tasks that take place within the same company or within the same process. That is our added value. So, for example, if you are interested in process mining, you can say, what we can do is we can, of course, manage and analyze the performance improvement for a certain task, but we can do much better. We can also show you whether your investment in AI has an actual impact on the overall process, because that is something that very few organizations are able to do themselves. And that is something that we can do, or at least we can help them to understand that better. So broadening the perspective, better understanding the impact of using AI in specific places for entire processes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And last but not least,
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. So, hello, Dr. Reijers. My name is Nicholas Evan, and now I'm a bachelor degree student from information system. And now my final task focuses on object-centric process mining using Mr. Yudi's data, if I'm not mistaken, Prof. Mahendra. And here, I'm trying to identify bottlenecks and evaluate event cycle times within a cultivation life cycle event log. So in traditional process mining, isolating a bottleneck is straightforward, right? And because we follow a single case sequentially. But when analyzing an OCPM model where fundamentally different object types intersect at a single event, so what is your recommendation methodology for isolating with specific object is the true root cause of a bottleneck, and how do you recommend identifying the true critical path or the pain area, so we know that resolving a specific bottleneck will actually improve the overall processes? Thank you.
So the question is, if I understand it correctly, if I can give you a recommendation for a method to determine the performance of processes where you have an where you take an object-centric perspective.
Yes.
Wow. You waited with the most difficult question for the last question. I don't think I can give you a very specific methodology. I think what is true is for that now we move into an object-centric perspective. It enriches us our understanding of the world, because we are more aware of how different objects interact with each other and relate to each other. But it makes things also more difficult in the sense that we used to have one case running through a process and completing, and it was very clear that if we wanted to find the performance of a process, that we needed to track only one object and that there were, you know, very clearly identifiable states of a start and an end that we could compare with each other, where we now have a much more complex world where individual objects and sub-objects run independently for a while, then are synchronized again. So I think instead of giving you a methodology, I think that the best way to go is to first make a very clear specification of your performance indicator. So the performance indicator that you are interested in, if you say cycle time, right? We used to understand what cycle time is because there was only one case, right? It was the moment from start to the end of the completion. But now, if you now say cycle time, maybe you now have to specify it first to such a degree that you say, well, the cycle time for me is that if it is, I don't know, if it's about a complex object like an order, the cycle time is for me the initiation of the order, which is a high-level object, until the final completion of the last suborder, right? That is a much more, I would say, sophisticated description of your performance indicator than we used to have, but it is necessary because we now have all these different types of the different objects running and having partly their own life cycle and having their connections. So I think the key is defining more specifically what your desirable performance indicator is, and then determining your calculations and your analysis based on that performance indicator. So instead of immediately analyzing the data, we have to take a step back and have to think and specify the actual performance that we are interested in terms of the object-centric view of the world. If that makes any sense.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think just in the interest of time, we can always do all the questions again, but then I think we have to stop here. And we would like to thank you very much, Professor Hajo Reijers, for sharing with us the insights of past, present, and future for process science. Let's give an applause to.
Thank you.
I'd like to hand over back to Christine, and then we will continue with some ceremonial things.
All right, what an insightful session from Professor Hajo Reijers. As a sophomore undergraduate student, I learned a lot from the session about the past, present, future, business process management things, and I also hear a lot from the discussion between Professor Hajo and all the participants about the real problem of business process management. And I think all of us today are later living not with new knowledge, but also even greater curiosity to learn more about the business process management in the future.
Is it okay?
Once again, thank you, Prof. Hajo, for your generously sharing his knowledge, expertise, and valuable experience with us this morning. And as a token of our appreciation, allow us to present a memento and small souvenir to Professor Reijers. We invite Professor Hajo and Professor Mahendrawati to hand over the.
Actually, we welcome our beloved head of department, Professor Willy Andraini.
Hello. Hello. Nice to meet you. Thank you. Yes, thank you for being here.
The souvenir. Just one moment.
Thank you very much for your sharing your knowledge and sometimes for us.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure being here. Yeah.
We hope this is just the beginning of our next collaboration.
Oh, yes, that would be fantastic.
So,
yeah.
Yes. Please accept a small souvenir from us as a symbol of our expression and
kind.
our friendship.
Thank you so much. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Applause for Professor Hajo and Professor Reijers.
Thank you.
Thank you so
very
much. Thank you. Oh. Oh, how nice.
Right now,
Yeah.
we also have some things that we need to appreciate that during our business process management course, I was not doing and delivering it myself, but with a very big team. And one of them is Pak Dito. Please come forward. And also my teaching assistants, please come forward and take a picture of us.
Thank
you
you.
so much for your dedication. I know it's not easy. to
How are the
give
penalties? The
comments,
penalties are not going well, right?
uh,
It's not going well, right? We missed one.
You know, for taking care of
Oh,
them,
yeah.
baby and stuff like that. Please come and join me. And for the main coordinator, we have here Bara here.
Yes, sir. Hello.
Doing the modeling part.
Hi,
and
nice to meet
Kayla
you.
here for the
Hello,
estimation
nice to meet
part.
you.
And we
Hello.
also have many
Hi.
others.
Hello,
Please come
nice
and
to meet
join
you.
us.
Hi, thanks for your question again.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much, sir. So I quite engineering again. So
Oh, yeah. Good that you.
later,
Good that you already asked questions.
this line.
Oh, need we go up?
Yeah, I think maybe
Up.
up a little.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So there are so many of them.
Ah, please, sure. Yeah.
No,
Oh, the light is on. Should I put it out? Put it out. Yeah. Just, yeah, good.
here.
Oh, I put it up. Shall I put it up? I put it up. No? No?
Sorry.
Oh, you wanted to show it?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Really.
Is it better for the picture? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted to.
Okay.
We'll help you for this.
Let's see. Oh, the battery's gone. The battery's gone. Battery's gone.
All right.
Oh no, you're smaller. You have to be.
You need to mention that I'm smaller, okay? In front of you.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Hold your certificate, please. Okay.
Oh.
Give a very big smile and thank you very much for a very nice service to the. All right. Kembaliin ya. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Smile. And Professor Hajo already learned something nice yesterday, that is to give this.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Here's gonna be everywhere tomorrow. You're gonna be viral. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yes.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for attending. Yes.
Don't be boring to help in information system department.
I'm sorry. Yeah, definitely. It's so nice to be here. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll like to have a
Yeah.
documentation, a picture together with Prof. Hajo and Reijers.